Hello everybody, I'm Callum, I run Repair Wins, but today I'm in the dark and dingy back room of my non-profit because pretty much I've been tasked with scrapping an unbelievable amount of stuff and I don't have much time to do it. Still, I thought I'd grab the camera out and just point it at this old Dell tower here. I've got two of them. I think they're OptiPlex 390s or maybe OptiPlex 790s or even 990s. If I just pull them forwards, it is a 3010, alright, that's a bit newer than I anticipated. The point is, these things are worthless, mine are missing the DVD drives, and instead of just sending the entire box to scrap, I thought possibly there could be a quick video wherein I remove the power supply, 3D print a bracket, make the bracket freely available, and then you would have something that can be mounted inside a standard computer. So let me just get this PC, and without much care, I'll put it down on the floor. We'll open it up, and if we take a look, has it got a standard 24 pin? Yes it does, it has a standard 24 pin power connector. Standard CPU power connector. Obviously there's plenty of SATA cables in old boxes like these that you can pilfer, but that's my point, there's loads of usable parts in a computer like this. You got a standard fan, provided it uses a normal fan connector. No, of course not, this is Dell, why would it use a normal fan connector? But this power supply can absolutely be reused. It's a bit longer than your typical ATX supply, but that's probably not going to matter. CPU cooler, that's copper, so that's going on the recycling. You can have the wire off of the fan, then most of it's just a plastic housing that also goes in the recycling. The case goes in the recycling. All you really get left with is a motherboard and a processor which you can sell as a bundle cheaply, and a power supply which you can't do anything with. Hence the reason why I'm motivated to make this video. There might be a fan going to scrap as well, but I'm sure I've got two of these boxes, so I'm going to pull the supplies from them, and then the next clip will be me back at my flat, ready to actually work on this thing. I ended up bringing the machine back home, so in order to remove the power supply, by the way, you just pop the cover off. I mean, I suppose it differs for each model, but on my particular model, I'll pop the cover off. I'll just open this to give myself some slightly easier access. And then there's 3 screws on the back. The 3 screws just come out. Standard Phillips head screws. And the good thing about them is that they're coated black, so you can actually use them in gaming PCs as well. I quite like it when I've scrapped a couple PCs, because it means I've got loads of screws spare and a couple of spare SATA cables. Depending on how new the tower is, the BIOS battery might still have some life. You get spare fans and whatever else. But I've done that. I'm going to remove this cover. That can go in the recycling, so I don't need it. I'm going to remove this, which is just plastic and metal, so it too can go in the recycling. There's not an extra screw at the front, so I should just be able to push down, if you have a look, on this sort of blue tab here. So I push down on that, and then I can slide the power supply forwards, and then I'll be able to roll it, and then hopefully take it out of the box without removing the motherboard. To make my life easier, I'll unplug the CPU power. I don't think the SATA is plugged into anything, but they do occasionally zip tie stuff to the side of the unit. So why don't I just put it back in place? I'll unplug the motherboard power, and now I should be able to take the supply out. I'll roll it around, I'll just check, make sure I'm not putting any strain on anything. And there you go, there is a power supply. It's a bit grubby and whatnot, but if we take a look at it, 240 watts max. It doesn't have an 80 plus rating, but it'll probably be 80 plus bronze or something like that. The only issue is that this connector is really small, but you can buy a 24 pin motherboard extension for less than a £5. This video isn't about the other parts, so I'm not going to give them much mention, but as I've said earlier, I can scrap this, no problem at all. The motherboard, you would kind of have to get lucky, you would need to be patient, you're not going to make much cash, but I can turn around and sell the board and it'll basically cover the filament cost, and I'll get paid a tiny little bit for my time to do it. I'll stick the speaker, and I'll stick the power button in my box of spares, and the only thing that leaves left is the front panel USB and audio. I suppose if you were really sort of crafty, you might, 3D print a bracket, so you could stick this into a standard 5¼ inch bay. I think you'd be going to quite a lot of effort to do that, although I might actually try just to see if it's something I can do. But of all the parts in the entire PC, I think this is the only one you would actually struggle to dispose of. It only took a few minutes, and I was also able to break the fan down. I know of a company that basically takes scrap wire, so I can literally snip this off. And the only waste I have from this entire PC is this piece of metal. Or should I say this basically little motor with a little bit of circuitry on it. So I think that reducing this down to that is pretty good going. So then, out of both of the computers, I've ended up with 3 SATA cables. Evidently we used the 4th one somewhere else in the past. If I didn't have a use of this cable, I could stick it basically in the cable recycling that I've got. Same goes to the speaker. The 2 fans, they have non-standard connectors on them. I think you can sell them for about £8. May or may not be worth doing. I'm probably just going to bundle them with the motherboards, as I've already said. You can keep these little rubber grommet things and use them to secure fans to cases. I never bother. I always just use screws because these things are a bit fiddly. But you know, you could keep those if you wanted. I've got plenty of screws spare. Obviously, most importantly, I have the power supplies, which are the subjects of this video. I have the 2 boards, which obviously I'm going to try and sell to recoup, you know, the cost of the filament. And then lastly, I have the 2 front USB and audio panel kind of things. And the plan is I'm going to try and 3D print sort of a holder for these as well. Here we are then, I've got what I was talking about. You can see it's a 24-pin ATX extension. It's about 30 centimeters long. And what I can do is just simply plug it into the power supply, although it would obviously help to plug it in the right way round. And there we go, that's plugged in. And then furthermore, from an old basically DVD drive to hard drive adapter, I've got this thing. So what you can actually do is use this to power an SSD, and then you can use these 2 to power 2 hard drives, for example, or even you could just have 3 SSDs connected up in total. But I'm sure you'll agree it's a lot more useful having a standard SATA that can power an SSD than it is having this SATA Slimline on it that's practically useless in the modern world. I've realised that the fans can actually be reused as well. I had loads of these basically DuPont jumper cables, only they're really not very high quality, so the plan is to pretty much just get rid of the wire and then use the jumper basically as the new end for the fan. The way that they get the pin to stay in place is different between this cable and this one, but all you need to do is put a drop of super glue on the wire, push it in, and then it will basically stick itself in place solidly. So the way that you do it is that you've got this little pin and you lift the plastic piece up, which I normally do using a flathead screwdriver that's fairly small. You lift it up, you try and support it from beneath, and then you can just pull it out. So now that they're pulled out, it's really simple to do it on the Dell fan. Basically, you just push down on this pin and send it backwards. And then the final one, you just push down on the pin, and then you can pull it pretty much outwards. I've already put 2 of these on, but I just thought I'd show you how the 3rd one works. And I'm just going to put a drop of super glue at the top, and then I'm going to push the thing on, make sure it's basically sat in place, and that's all I'll need to do. Finally, we'll try and get this one to focus in nicely. Just a blob of super glue there. And then that way, I can Google the pin out for this fan, and I can just install it on a standard computer motherboard or computer case without any issues. So there we are. I can just leave that to dry now. In fact, the final flourish, just get a cotton bud and just absorb any of the excess that's squeezed out. If my research is correct, black is ground, red is 12 volt, yellow is tack, and I've plugged it into the connector down there, as you can see. So I'm probably not going to put the side panel back on. I'm probably just going to plug the thing in, switch it on and see if the fan starts spinning up, and if it does, I'll know I've done it correctly. It turns out that little connector down there isn't actually a fan connector, at least it's not officially labelled as a fan connector. That does mean that I'm going to have to remove the fan that I've just added, because at the moment there's nowhere to plug the main one in that goes on the side, and I'd rather have the beefy fan from the side than this, you know, little puny one at the back of the machine. I just wanted to demonstrate that the concept does work there. I was doing a bit of thinking on what the best way to mount the power supply is, because convention would just say that pretty much you just stick the power supply in the middle of where this one would be. So if this one's here, then this one basically would go there, if you catch my drift, you know, in the middle. And then basically it's just floating in the air. But the reason why I don't like that approach is that this is quite a long power supply and there's nothing to support it. The smartest thing to do would actually be to put the power supply in the case with this side facing downwards. So the supply goes like this, and then even better, the bottom of the supply would be lined up to where the bottom of this piece is. So that way the back of the case provides some extra support. And with that in mind, that's where this piece comes in. So I've modelled a 3D printable bracket. It's 4mm thick. It took about an hour to print. I can put this piece on the top, and then when the bracket is screwed on, The bottom of the supply is flush with the bottom of the bracket, meaning it's going to lean on the bottom of the case and it's going to be given some support. And the reason why I put it this way around and not that way around is because in 99% of cases, when the power supply is installed, it gets installed with the holes in this orientation. And doing it like this means that these wires are always facing into the case. There we go then, that's installed just the way I want it to be. 3 screws, nice and secure, it all lines up perfectly. Off camera I've checked, these are all going to line up with a normal case, and I've got no doubt in my mind that this is going to be nice and sturdy and secure once it's actually mounted into a computer. I've 3D modelled and then 3D printed this thing. It took about an hour to design and an hour and a half to print. This is the second revision, the first one had some issues, so I just went and made some minor tweaks. But now you can see this is what we've ended up with. In order for the thing to fit, this cable needs to be bent and then put under here, but once it's under there, that's all right. And then I can just line this up inside the holder. It's a pretty snug fit, but obviously it's got to be, so it does just take a moment to get it lined up. And then with a little bit of effort, if you're lucky, you can get it to fit in quite nicely. So that is lined up exactly the way that I want it to be. I can bend this cable back down now that I've gotten it in there. And then yeah, the idea is that a screw is going to go in here or there, depending on how the case is designed. Then the same again on the other side. And I've not currently printed them, but I've got some little braces that just go here, here, and there that are designed to press against this thing. But this is looking pretty decent. There's not really anything in the way of layer lines, and you know, it's certainly not going to look too bad once it's installed in a case. I've got the parts that I need on the desk, namely just a screwdriver, the piece itself, and then the 3D printed bit, and you can see that it fits exactly as it's supposed to. See, it slides in nicely. And then that exposes both of the screw holes. So I've just got 4 screws here. I'm probably not going to bother with the one in the middle. I think it should be sturdy enough without it, to be honest. Here it is in all its glory. So you can see I've obviously put the screws in the back. This thing is nice and secure, it's not going to go anywhere. You know, if you were to just sort of make a passing glance at that, you would just think it came out of a regular machine. You wouldn't think it was a part that's been built effectively out of scrap, but that's what it is. So just 70 or 80 pence worth of filament is all that you need. And then obviously, if you're doing this sort of thing all the time, you've got plenty of spare screws. But all I need to do is just put a zip tie on here, and then, you know, it's done. And you can actually see that if I plug a USB drive in, slots in as it should, and there's a tiny gap between the front of the drive and then this piece here, meaning it's basically the perfect thickness. This is I'd like to say this is quite a decent design. It should be nice and sturdy anyway. You know, I'd be happy to sell a computer with that inside it. I'm afraid my desk is in use, so I'm having to do this on the floor, but you can see the front of the PC here. You can clearly see the I/O, the 2 USB ports and the audio jacks, and then the DVD drive that's above it. And on the inside of the PC you can just about see how everything connects. So the wires come through from the front of the case, they make their way on round, the audio goes all the way to here, there's a little extender that only costs 99 pence, and then it plugs in below the GPU. And then the USB cable is just long enough to reach to the header on the motherboard, so you can see the yellow and then the black headers. It's the green header plugged in above. As for the power supply, you can see it's extending out the back of the machine. I misjudged how long it is, so you can see the clearance between the power supply and the DVD drive is basically non-existent. There is about 1 centimetre though, because there has to be room for the SATA cable, which is actually beneficial because it means the power supply can still pull cool air in. But if I hadn't put a DVD drive in the front of the machine, if I'd just installed a blanking plate or put something else there, I wouldn't have had to set the power supply backwards. But you can see the power supply is mounted, it's mounted securely, and I was quite pleased with the solution I came up with, because you can actually see, oh no, you can't see unfortunately, but what I ended up doing was using motherboard standoffs. So there's a screw here, there's one there, and then there's one there. They're actually motherboard standoffs, which are then screwed into from the inside of the case, and then the power supply is just mounted to the exterior. Anyway, it ends up giving you something that's really, really sturdy, and so I was quite pleased with it. As for the wiring, that took a lot of effort as well. So you can see the 24-pin connector, and I just used an extension. I've zip tied everything to the extension to make it as neat as I can. Obviously it's never going to be perfect, but it's as neat as I can get it. So I extended one of the SATA connectors into a Molex, and obviously I did that so I could plug it into the USB ports. You can just see the heat shrink there from where I've cut and then where I've soldered extra length in there. I had a SATA splitter spare from an old project, which which one of the SATA ports is going to the SSD, as you can see, and then the other one, as already mentioned, is turned into a Molex and it goes down into there. And then the CPU power is simple enough. That just happened to be the right length, and I was able to run the cable and plug it in. As for actually designing the bracket that holds the power supply, I thought it was going to be simple, and it ended up being an absolute nightmare. I've got plenty of ATX templates, and I assumed this case used the ATX standard, but it doesn't. So the plan had just been to measure the back of the Dell supply, cut a hole in an ATX template in CAD, and then 3D print a part, and I would be away. But the reality is that the power supply in this case doesn't use standard mounting holes, so I've had to design literally an HP ProLiant ML110 power supply bracket, and then model the Dell supply to go into the back of that. It took an absolute age. I managed to get there in the end, but it was just needlessly difficult. All of that was compounded by the fact that I had to cut a hole in the back cover and file away at it for the I/O, which I was expecting I'd have to do, but then also there was this big sort of bit jutting out beneath the CPU cooler that meant the motherboard wouldn't sit flat, so I had to take an angle grinder, cut that away, then I had to file it, and then, in order to clean everything up, I had to drill loads of rivets out so I could take the side and the lid of the case off. I say the lid, the top of the case, and then this bottom piece here, because it's one assembly. I had to drill a ton of rivets out to remove that so that I could, file the modification I'd made on the back smooth. It just ended up taking so much longer than it needed to, because HP have gone to such unbelievable lengths to make this case non-standard. And making the case non-standard in so many ways really doesn't make any sense, because HP would have had to spend a bunch of money on tooling a non-standard power supply just to fit into the case. Now remember, I had to angle grind out the rear I/O and then file it down, so that means no one was ever going to reuse this case anyway. So why would you make the power supply a nightmare and the I/O and have this thing jutting out beneath the board, and then make it so that you have to drill out rivets just to actually gain access to the internals? Really doesn't make any sense. But I suppose these things don't always make sense. I mean, these companies have a very strange way of doing things. There is one credit I can give to HP though, and that is that the case is nice and sturdy. Sturdy enough, in fact, for 65 kilogram Callum to sit on. Seriously though, this project ended up taking me way longer than I anticipated. It was literally 2 months ago when I was at Recognition, when I took those 2 junk towers off the scrap heap, and I was like, right, I'll make a quick video, bring the machines home, take the power supplies out, 3D print a bracket, install them, job done. I wasn't expecting it to run for more than 10 minutes. And the reality is that I was like, because I always get these smart ideas where I'm like, oh, I can just do this as well, and I can just do this as well. And it ends up just, every project runs on for so much longer than anticipated. I have realised that had I just planned ahead, I could have got this thing done a lot more quickly. Obviously speed isn't always the name of the game, but at the end of the day, I run a business, I can't be spending, weeks on these little projects, and obviously it's not like it's the only thing on my desk over a period of weeks, but having to constantly put the thing back together and move it and find somewhere to put it, and then, you end up with this scrap computer or halfway scrap machine sat on your living room sofa just getting in the way all of the time. If I'd planned a little bit better, and if I hadn't been so cocky, and I don't say cocky as in like, oh, I'm Mr. Know-It-All, I know everything, I mean as in, I bought a computer, I thought, yeah, I can modify that, how hard will it be? And it turned out to be very hard, because I had to angle grind the back, I had to model a bracket for the power supply, I had to angle grind the inside, 3D print a bracket for the fan, the front I/O would fit, but then I had to glue sort of an L bracket to the back, and if I'd just planned and chosen a slightly easier to modify case, my life would have been a lot more simple. But the moral of the story there is that I persevered through it. I've got a computer that's useful. I mean, it has Linux installed on it. I'm going to end up selling it because I don't have a use for the computer. I just wanted to prove what's possible, and I think I have done that, even though my project took an age. I hope it's not put you off, because the reality is, if you have a non-standard power supply and a little bit of 3D modelling experience, you can model a bracket for it in half an hour, send it to the 3D printer, let it run while you're out of the house, and then when you get back, you've got the bracket and you've saved money on buying a new power supply. The front I/O in most cases is a bit harder. I was lucky because mine was standard. Most of the time the connectors aren't standard, and if they aren't, then you probably would be wasting your time trying to reverse engineer the thing. But these PCs, they'll contain a DVD drive, so you can take that. They'll contain the I/O. half the time you can take that. Power supply, you can take that, and a fan, you can take that. That's what I've managed to do here. And remember that if you take on a project like this, chances are it won't be as difficult for you as it was for me. I really don't want to put people off. The name of the channel is to make sure stuff is getting reused, or should I say the aim of the channel is to make sure that things are getting reused. We're keeping stuff out of landfill, we're showing as many people as possible how to repair things, and we're showing that usually it's simple and that usually there aren't any barriers to entry. Anyway then, if you like what you saw today, then feel free to leave a like. That would really help me out. If you really enjoyed it, then hit the subscribe button. You'll see the new stuff that comes out as and when it comes out. Currently on the desk, I can look down at it. There's an Xbox 360. It's in pieces. I bought it secondhand for cheap. I'll make a lot of modifications to it. It's going to be a really interesting video, at least I think, when it actually comes out. Otherwise, I'll look over to the whiteboard and we've got PS2 housing swap. So I'm going to take a PlayStation 2 that's, mashed up, swap it into a different housing, and then also I've worked out how to power it with a laptop charger, because I have loads of laptop chargers spare and 0 PlayStation 2 power adapters. Otherwise then, I'm going to try and take this broken iPod dock and turn it into a Bluetooth speaker, because it was built by Sony, and to their credit, it's a really, really high quality item, though it did break down. But the point is, it's a really nice high quality item, so why not try and modify it and turn it into a speaker, because it's got very nice speakers inside. I can embed a nice big battery, ideally, and then we'll have homemade Bluetooth speaker for just the cost of a battery and a Bluetooth audio module. Anyway then, that's all I've got time for today, so fingers crossed I'll see you in the next one. Take care for now, and goodbye.